What are the short and long-term implications of a president who has that view?
So, let me say that the long-term implications are potentially catastrophic. And everybody, you can hate me, you can hate everything, I understand that. But the problem is the speed at which the world is warming and the climate is changing. It's not that the climate is changing, it's the rate. Half the people in the world live near coastlines. As the ocean gets a tiny bit warmer, it gets a tiny bit bigger, but the ocean is big and a tiny bit is huge. So it is to be hoped that we can head this off. Now, when you say, Senator, what the president believes, I often, is it true that he contradicts himself?
Every other minute, so.
So it is reasonable to me that if we can show an economic benefit to turning things around, we could turn things around. And the example I hearken to all the time, everybody, is the Solutions Project. And the Solutions Project is a group of civil engineers who've done an analysis that shows we could power the entire U.S. renewably right now if we just decided to do it. And by that I mean we'd have wind turbines, solar panels, some geothermal energy, some tidal energy. And if we exploited all these things aggressively and reconfigured our electric grid a little bit, we could run the whole place. And so here's the thing about it that I find intriguing and important is these would be U.S. jobs. Right. Even if the wind turbine blades are designed in Sweden or Finland or Denmark, you have to put them up, you have to erect the turbines here. And these are going to be U.S.
No question
jobs.
about it.
So here's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we can get people on that side of this issue to look at it in just even the medium term, they will see that
from an economic point of view,
there's a huge opportunity here.
But before you even get there, and I absolutely agree with you, I have colleagues right here in the United States Senate who say, well, you know, yeah, it looks like it is, the earth is getting a little bit warmer, but you know, these things have always gone on, and you know, we got hot spells and we got cold spells, and the science really is not clear. There are always two sides of the story.
No,
Tell me why they are wrong.
Well, the science is settled, everybody. Sorry, it's 97%.
I watch Fox television. They don't agree.
So that's the one thing that really is hard for me about Fox News is the denial of climate change in science. The other stuff, many of the other things they assert are troubling, but that one is the one that just crosses the line for me. And furthermore, I'm pretty sure that the anchors who present that, they're no better, and they're just going along with...
So let me ask you a question, but I think most people know the answer. Fossil fuel industry, incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
They have ads on television every 5 minutes. They make a lot of campaign contributions.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Huge amount of political influence. What impact does that influence have on the whole debate over climate change?
Well, that's what I say all the time, that climate change deniers, who apparently no longer want to be called deniers, they want to be called extreme skeptics, they have been able to introduce the idea that plus or minus 2%, what have you, from a scientific standpoint, is the same as plus or minus 100%. And that's wrong. So in other words, when people try to predict the temperature 10 years or 50 years hence, they might be off a tenth of a degree Celsius, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. It means that there's a little scientific uncertainty. It's not the same as uncertainty about the whole thing. And it's ironic or amazing that they've hired the same people who were in denial about cigarette and cancer.
That was the question I was going to ask you.
It's just
are we seeing
Those
a
guys
rerun
are
of the whole?
around.
Are we seeing a rerun of the whole denial of tobacco causes cancer?
Yeah, yeah. But this is an analogy that you can take exception to analogies. The facts, the scientific facts, are overwhelming. So here's what I'm saying, Senator, is that because people are so passionate about it, I think when they see the light, like who is the strongest environmentalist? The guy who just built his log cabin. Right? Who is the strongest anti-smoker? The guy who just managed to quit. Mm-hmm. So from an optimistic point of view, I think if we can get these people to just look at the world a little differently, they will be on the side of domestically produced renewable electricity in very quick, short order.
Bill, I want to get to what America will look like when we transform our energy system and move aggressively to energy efficiency. But before I do that, let me ask you kind of the frightening question. What happens if we don't do that?
Oh,
what happens to my kids and my grandchildren?
Well, yeah, your grandkids.
What kind of planet are they going to inherit if we don't act aggressively?
What's going to happen. In the developed world where we are, we will build seawalls. You know, the big U in Manhattan, they're building a system of seawalls and parks to avoid the catastrophic effects of Hurricane Sandy. And you can say, well, Hurricane Sandy came and went, everything's cool. But no, the economic costs, billions of dollars in the city of New York, which rippled around the world because New York really is a world city. And when it has financial trouble, the whole world does. So we can do those sort of seawall mitigation projects here in the developed world. But in the developing world, it's much more difficult. People are going to move and be displaced. And a scenario that I've imagined that seems very reasonable, and people in like the 9th Ward of New Orleans, as the ocean comes in, they're going to leave. They're just going to leave, and they're going to default on their mortgages, and there's going to be all this infrastructure, copper wiring and plumbing and all the stuff that's just going to be sitting there. And it's going to be
obviously
really
it's not just
troublesome.
the United States. It's going to be developing countries all over the world.
Yeah.
Millions of people being forced to migrate.
Yeah, Mike, and where are they going to go, and what are they going to eat, and there's going to be conflict, and we could avoid all this if we just got to work right now.
And what about drought and floods and stuff like that?
Well, that's it. So there are people who make very strong argument to me. These are climate scientists that a lot of the unrest in the Middle East is displaced young men who don't want to work the family farm anymore because the family farm isn't doing as well as it used to because rainfall patterns have changed. They go to the big cities, they can't get jobs, they get disenfranchised, and then they get involved in essentially terrorist operations. Now you can bite my head off about this, but it's a very reasonable hypothesis, and I've seen no evidence that it's not reasonable. So everybody, I say all the time, Senator, we have to be optimistic. We have to get to work. And to the deniers out there, or the extreme skeptics, I want you to think about what's called cognitive dissonance. Do you remember cognitive dissonance? Good liberal arts education thing. This is a psychology theory that you can run tests and show that it's true. The guy who really suffered from cognitive dissonance is the fox and his grapes. So he can't get to the grapes. The fox is trying to get to the grapes. He can't get them, so he says the grapes must be sour. And he says that to him, or she, to herself, so that she will not have this conflict in her mind as a vixen, as a fox, a female fox. She says this so that she can be at peace. So I submit to you, climate deniers, that what you're doing is, instead of accepting that climate is changing, you're denying the evidence, and along with that, you're dismissing the authorities.
All right, how do you respond?
And that's where I think you come in, is how can you say the authorities on climate change aren't authorities?
I sit on a committee. I sit on the Energy Committee. I sit on the Environmental Committee. I sit right across the aisle from guys who say, yeah, it's getting a little bit warm, but it's always been like that. There really is no proof that human activity and has caused climate change. What's the answer?
So here's what we say. There's overwhelming proof. Proof isn't even the word. It's overwhelming evidence. And so what I believe you're doing on the other side is you're suffering from this magical thing called the backfire effect. When you see evidence that conflicts with your worldview, you just double down on denying it. And we all do it. I don't hear that sound in my car. My car is fine. Everything will be fine. The kinks will work out. Everything will be fine. I don't need to get maintenance done on it. We all do this. But the stakes with respect to climate change and the world's population are huge. Now, when I was a kid, there were fewer than 3 billion people in the world. Now there's 7.3. There's going to be 9, even 10 billion people in the world, and those people are going to want something to eat and some place to live. And it's not that it's not just that the world has too many people. That's not it. It's that we're not using our resources as well as we could.
Bill, two questions. Number one, give me some examples of the power of the fossil fuel industry. I mean, in maintaining this nonsense that climate change is not real. And then I want you to talk about what does this planet, what does this country look like when we transform our energy system?
You know, the success of the fossil fuel industry is amazing to me. Now, I have been to the tar sands. Have you been there?
No.
In Fort McMurray, Alberta. And this is, the tar sands influenced the building of the XL pipeline, and then not too far from there, the Dakota pipeline.
Right.
You guys, the scale of it is literally hard to imagine. I was in a helicopter doing television, and you can't see the end of it. A quarter of the province of Alberta, which is comparable in size to most of Montana, is now denuded. The forest has been scraped away, and this tar there's the fossil fuel industry, for example, has tried to promote the idea that it's called oil sand, but it's tar, everybody. It's tar. It sticks to your boots. I mean, it's tar. Anyway, this is especially expensive and dirty oil because about 30% of the energy in the tar has to be used to make the synthetic crude oil. And it makes a Canadian citizen the biggest carbon footprint in the developed world. Without the tar sands, a Canadian citizen does pretty well in carbon footprint. But if you go there and look at the expanse of the destruction, environmental destruction, I can't believe you won't change your mind about fossil fuels. Now,
have you, in the course of your work, bumped into folks in the industry and chatted with them about why they want to perpetuate the use of fossil fuel?
Well, here's what I think it is, Senator. I met this engineer who works for Shell Oil, and this is what his family has always done. And I will say, I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, but chemical engineers like to solve problems and make things. So they make plastic, which we all depend on. I mean, our clothing, our textiles, the ink on these coffee mugs, everything depends on our ability to make unique molecules that wouldn't otherwise occur in nature. And so I think people, from an engineering standpoint, get caught up in just solving problems.
But the guys who own the companies,
well, that's what
they're
I don't
caught
get.
up in making a lot of money.
Well, they
aren't
make a lot of money, and as I told the people at Exxon in 1994 when I did a job with Exxon and Ellen DeGeneres and Walt Disney Company, you guys should be in the energy business, not the oil business. And if they use if fossil fuel companies use their resources, the money, to go into these different businesses, they would get even richer. That's my claim.
All right, what is the potential? Let's start off with energy efficiency. I know in Vermont we have made some progress in cutting back on the consumption of electricity. We've made our buildings, our farms more energy efficient.
Huge opportunities, you guys.
Say a word about that.
Well, in conservation, if you insulate your attic, if you want to spend money on something medium term, it's your windows. Our windows have historically been very inefficient. You know, it's a hole in the wall with a conductive piece of something that conducts heat, right, a piece of glass. If you put in double or even in Vermont triple pane windows with a inert gas in between, low emissivity, this metal flame sprayed glass, you will save a lot of money for free. That is to say, you don't have to build a bigger furnace, you don't have to buy more oil, but it's a long-term thing. It's like buying a car.
So it's an investment today which will pay off in the short term, actually.
And so, you know, to this thing, there was this, it sounded to me arbitrary, Senator, where people want to cut 2 regulations for every regulation that exists. What? Well, who came up with that number? Due respect. But why this seems just somebody like made it up. You want, regulations are like a machine. You want all the parts you need, but no more. Is that accurate?
Yes.
But you don't just start taking parts off the machine just 'cause. Now, I grew up in the city of Washington, in the city limits of Washington, Senator, And I remember when the Potomac River was just this deadly thing. You didn't even go near it. It smelled terrible. And the Potomac Electric Power Company killed fish all day because the second law of thermodynamics constrains you to cool off the back end of your turbine. And so the hot water just killed, there was just dead fish all day. And so we don't have to do that, everybody. The reason there aren't as many dead fish now is because we have regulations. It's not a bad thing, it's a thing.
And why the air in California
is
a
so
little
much
bit
cleaner than it
New York
used to
City.
be.
All right, let me ask you this. Talk about transportation. What amazed me,
Now, I didn't cue you on this, but you know I'm driving a Chevy Bolt now. Bolt with a B like Bravo, all electric, 232 miles. I can drive to Palm Springs and back.
You have a range of 232 miles on it?
Yes,
Okay.
U.S. built car that's from the old industry.
All right, but the potential is funny. I was at the Henry Ford Museum in, I think, Dearborn, Michigan.
Veritable place.
And I asked the guy there, tell me, what would the original Model A get? I think it was like 14 or 15 miles per gallon. There are people driving cars today we have that don't do a hell of a lot better than the first cars on the road. What is the potential of transforming our energy system?
So we didn't discuss this.
We did not.
So what we want to do, everybody, is electrify all ground transportation, cars, trucks, trains, all of it. Well, that would be really hard, sort of. Okay, so I'm driving an electric car. I will go to another big city, New York, on the electric train, and we can do this. You know, everybody, after you drive an electric car, you'll never go back. You just never go back.
Right, but the goal then is to make those cars affordable.
Affordable. So the Chevy Bolt comes in now with it, albeit with the incentives, under $40,000. And people spend $40,000 on cars. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. But people spend that on cars all the time. And so...
And your fuel is now cheaper than gas.
Yes, so in California, right, at current prices, it costs about a fourth as much to run an electric car as a gas-powered car. And by the way, everybody, there's no maintenance. Well, we want to sell you the oil change maintenance. No, there's no oil to change. There's tires, and you rotate the tires, and windshield washer fluid. Those are your maintenance costs.
All right, despite the very strong opposition of the fossil fuel industry and their paid representatives here in the Congress, we have made some progress in moving to sustainable energy. A hell of a lot more solar, wind turbines, geothermal. Talk a little bit about how we have to transform our energy system and what it looks like in the future.
This is a great question. So imagine, you know what a roof looks like. We all know what a roof looks like. Imagine all the roofs are solar panels. They're that dark blue, or maybe in the future they'll be even darker, and everybody will make electricity everywhere. And so you can hate Senator Sanders, you can hate me, you can hate everything, you can just be a miserable hater person. But when you get an electric bill in California, which doesn't have especially cheap electricity, when you get an electric bill for $10 every 60 days, that's just fun. Okay, that's just fun. Just look at it that way. So imagine a future where virtually every big building, Walmarts, factories, warehouses, all have solar panels on the roof oriented in our country a little bit south. We get enormous amount of electricity from these systems, and then we have to create, and it's not that hard, we can do it, create an electric grid that can accept all this energy that's produced in a distributed fashion rather than a concentrated fashion. And so also, if you're an engineer out there, if you're a young person in engineering school right now, I love you, but if you want to get crazy rich, make a battery that's even a little bit better than we have now. And then we have the storage problem, which should be solved locally. So at the Solutions Project, by way of example, the engineers strongly believe that we don't have to work that hard to solve the storage problem, that the wind is blowing somewhere, the sun is shining somewhere all the time. We don't use as much energy at night as we do during the day. So the wind blows at night, and we could store this energy this is right now, if we just decided to do it. These are domestic jobs. It can't be exported. It's a new industry.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the price of solar has, of course, plummeted,
Yeah, oh yeah.
and it is now competitive with, in parts of the country.
Well, in Iowa, they get a quarter of their electricity from the wind.
Right.
In Texas, they get, in sometimes a year, they get 10% of it. This is in Texas. So I took pictures in Stanton, Texas. There are wind turbines casting shadows on oil pumps. What did you
And that's very
transform?
cheap electricity, is
Oh,
it
it's
not?
once the turbine's up, it's free. I mean, in a sense. Now, when deniers will come out of the woodwork about killing birds.
Yes, suddenly they just,
If you want to kill birds, coal-fired electricity plants are really the way to go. If killing birds is a thing for you, there's nothing better than the exhaust from coal plants. Wind turbines, we can solve this problem. By the way, when you're at the tar sands, there are cannons that go off all day and night.
to keep the birds away.
Keep the birds away. Because the tailing ponds are so toxic. They don't want to kill these enormous populations of birds. If you want to kill birds, fossil fuel is fantastic. So we can solve this problem, everybody. We can do this. And I grew up in the U.S., got my engineering degree in the U.S., my license in the U.S. I worked in aerospace full-time for 20 years, 10 years part-time. I'm a patriot. I want the U.S. to be the world leader in this stuff.
And
I'm
by
not a
the
bad
way, if we
person.
develop these technologies, these are technologies that can be exported to China, to India, all over the world. yes?
Exactly, yes. Especially, what does the U.S. do, Senator, is innovate. The technologies for distributing the electricity are closely related to mobile phones, where as you drive, the phone call is handed from cell to cell.
Mm-hmm.
So distributing the electricity is the same kind of thing. We want to automate it. Just another opportunity for you electrical engineers is power. Enormous innovations have happened in making information technology more and more compact. But electricity on large scale has to be managed in new and cool ways. Wow, Senator, I feel like I've just talked and talked. I appreciate it.
All right, we talked a little bit about solar, we talked about wind. What other technologies of the future are out there that can be exploited?
Well, people ask me this all the time. Bill, what's the next huge thing? And I think it's a result of these kids today growing up with the internet. No, the internet emerged and it just changed the world. Just changed the world. How many out there have taken an Uber? You'd use your phone to bring a car. The cars never have to park. The people who operate the cars, that's their business. You don't have to own a car or insure a car or store a car. It could transform the world. And it's just this integration of information technology with existing roads and cars. So it's amazing. So I don't know what the next innovation is going to be, but my solar panels on my house out west are about 15% efficient. Spacecraft's solar panels are over 30% efficient. And that's done by you manufacture them. The ones that come out the best, you sell to satellite manufacturers. But there is substantial evidence for me that people are going to have innovations to make solar panels more efficient and more cheaply by not wasting as much silicon. And so that's just for starters. If solar panels went from 15% efficient to 25% efficient,
A huge transformation.
huge transformation, and then they'd also be cheaper, then you make your own electricity. So if you hate me and you hate the government, solar energy is for you, because you'll make your own electricity. And so it's very difficult in urban areas to make all the electricity you need.
Project.
So I'm supportive of the Solutions Project. I'm not a civil engineer who did the analysis, but I've read the papers, and it's pretty compelling.
And the bottom line of what they say is in fact, within a reasonably short period of time, we could break our dependency on fossil
absolutely.
fuel.
15 years, we'd be 80% renewable. In other words, only 20% of our electricity would come from traditional sources, which include nuclear plants. Then in 30 years, we'd be 100% renewable, all renewable. The thing about nuclear plants, I know there are proponents out there, very reasonable, dig the stuff up, fission it, make electricity, put it back in the ground, all very good. But people don't want it around. And so licensing a nuclear plant takes 15 or 20 years. And
Not to mention how you get rid of that waste
well, that's
safely.
the big thing is, when you say you're going to bury something for the extent of time that would be the equivalent of 10 Roman empires, that's an extraordinary claim, you guys. I mean, I'm right there with you, but that you're asking a lot of people. That's really a haughty outlook. So the big problem, though, with nuclear is people don't want it, and getting the licenses is really time-consuming and difficult.
All right, Bill, let me ask you this. What is the role of scientists today? I mean, scientists, literally people who are searching for truth, are under pressure.
Oh, man.
Talk about that for a second.
So, I have close friends who work in climate science, and I've become friends because they are very concerned about their data being reviewed or erased, and they're also concerned about their jobs.
And being attacked personally in some ways.
Being attacked personally. So Michael Mann's a friend of mine. He gets an envelope in the mail with white powder in it. He has kids. The kids didn't do this, and they're attacking him personally, ad hominem, because he made this discovery. Now, Senator, I'm still starry-eyed and optimistic and perhaps unrealistic in this sense.
I don't think it's unrealistic.
But here's what we want to do. We want to find common ground. And I think a place to start is space exploration. I'm not joking you. Here's my claim, you guys. The United States has led the world in space exploration. Other countries are very interested in catching up. This year, China will launch more rockets than the United States. They will be the world leader in what we call the cadence, how often a rocket is launched. But here's what I submit to you. If we were to discover evidence of life on another world, it would change the course of human history. And I'm not joking you. So the role of people who, many people who are on energy committees are on space committees. Is that accurate?
Somewhat.
Yeah. So if we got people excited about making discoveries in space by applying our intellect and treasure to these exploration of space, which is it's 0.4% of the federal budget, we could make extraordinary strides that would once again show people that scientists are trying to learn about nature and the universe.
And you think that's a better investment than building nuclear weapons?
Yes.
All right, I just want to get you on record.
So nuclear weapons, everybody, the scale of it is really hard to imagine. You guys, look, you can look it up, okay? So do you know I took one class from Carl Sagan, and this changed my life, okay? So Carl Sagan and James Pollock were looking into the effects of a nuclear war. And this was about the same time that James Hansen was studying the planet Venus. And they realized that they showed quite reasonably that if you set off a bunch of nuclear weapons on the same weekend, you would create this crazy cloud of dust. And this was in about 1980. Then a few years later, Walter Alvarez and Luis Alvarez discovered this layer of iridium, atomic number 77, around the world. And they went, well, how did this iridium get here? It's very common in asteroids, but not especially common on the Earth's surface because it being such a big molecule, a big atom rather, the iridium sank to the middle of the Earth when the Earth was molten. So this research into the climate effects of nuclear war and the greenhouse effect on Venus and the discovery of an asteroid that probably wiped out the ancient dinosaurs, this all came together. And that's why James Hansen testified in front of the U.S. Congress in June of 1988 that we have climate change happening. and we got to do something about this. So these were scientists working in all different fields, and they made this discovery that we now show is the way the ancient dinosaurs were killed. And by the way, there is no evidence that the ancient dinosaurs had a space program. And so they suffered catastrophic failure. Control, Alt, Delete, as we say in computing.
All right, let me end the discussion, because I've got to get going. But
you're very gracious to listen to all this.
No, I could listen to it a lot more, but I got. On this note, what is the likelihood of another major asteroid hitting Earth?
So, there are about 100,000 Earth orbit crossing asteroids, and there are many millions of other objects in what might be called near-Earth space. So what we want to do is find them. And this is a very difficult business. As the saying goes, it's like looking for a piece of charcoal in the dark.
There have been major asteroids that have done terrible damage to the Earth in the past.
Well, there was one, that wiped out the ancient dinosaurs, and there's evidence there have been a great many more.
Life on the planet.
Catastrophic.
How many years ago was that?
300 million. So that's a long time.
But
it's a low probability but high consequence. And we remind you.
See, I just wanted to say that because the people didn't think they had enough to worry about with Trump as president. I wanted to throw that probability.
Well, but this is
as well.
solvable, everybody, and the U.S. could be the world leader in this. If you want to lower the cost of things, by the way, you engage international partners. Every space mission to Mars has many, many instruments built in other countries by other space agencies and other contractors. And we remind us, all the money spent in space is actually spent on Earth. So we could invest in finding asteroids, and that budget's gone up, to be sure, in finding asteroids and preparing, I'm not kidding, spacecraft to study them and deflect one, should it ever happen. And this would be a worthy use of our intellect and treasure. It's not that much money, and it would be exciting. And it could save the world.
All right.
So everybody, I still, despite the extraordinary events of the last few months, I'm still optimistic about the U.S. becoming a world leader in renewable energy. There's three things we want for everybody on Earth. We want clean water, renewably produced reliable electricity, and access to electronic information, to the internet, for everybody in the world. And my claim, Senator, is that when you provide these services for everyone, the quality of life for everyone goes up. The motivation for people to become terrorists, the motivation for people to cheat writ large goes down when their quality of life goes up. And this is where you and I are like-minded, sir, and I so very much appreciate you including me. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, thank you so much for being here today.